Hey everyone, welcome back to Crypto Cash. Thank you so much again for joining me here. I hope you're having a phenomenal day. We're taking a quick look here at this breakout here for Bitcoin. A government shutdown and Bitcoin is pumping. That seems kind of odd, right? We'll double check some important factors, keep abreast on these things here by enabling alerts, hitting the like button, and commenting below if you get a chance to let me know what is your position on Bitcoin or whatever altcoin you like to trade. What are you doing? All right, so let's take a look here, of course, as well today at some overviews, specifically the order block data, some comparative analysis on specific altcoins and their candlestick patterns. Then obviously just touch on CME futures as well as liquidation data for the macro, what areas are heavily concentrated, and more specifically, what just happened in the last 24 hours. Shorts getting absolutely destroyed. Awesome stuff in a lot of ways, depending on what side you're on. Let's take a closer look. All right, folks, let's go ahead and jump into the back-end data here. And before we do, I just got a quick community update. Don't forget to go ahead and make sure you either renew or consider subscribing to our October sale. We got a really good opportunity here with a newest feature, permanent access. We've already got 3 people taking advantage of that here. And there's only 50 slots available, so we're down to about 38 left remaining. So just a heads up, those spots are going fast. And I try not to provide too many memberships at any given time just because I don't want to convolute our private trading group there and just make sure things get too overpopulated. Less is more in a lot of ways. So just be mindful of that. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out, but information is in the comments below. Now, when it comes to the next stop for Bitcoin, I asked on social media what your thoughts are on where we're going to go next for Bitcoin. We're going to see 120K or higher, or possibly 114 or lower. Approximately 2/3 of you feel on crypto Twitter that 120K is the likely next stop for Bitcoin. I would say from a bird's eye view, I feel like that's the case as well because we have broken a strong descending trend line and we've reclaimed specific levels. But I do also think we're going to see a short-term pullback. We'll talk about that here in a minute. Let's refresh this here because I don't think we got the right information up here for YouTube where we have a lot more votes. I feel, yeah, there we go, close to 30 votes. 86% of you feel we're going to see 120K next. So crypto YouTube and crypto Twitter are both very, very bullish at this point. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the back-end data, kind of see if there's any telling signs in any direction that we're going to head. More specifically here, what are the order blocks looking like? Well, we got a pretty heavy order block at about 116,400. There's about 70 million in volume right at that one level. Okay, now keep in mind, every $100 here we can see kind of averaged out. 116.5 is that local support for us, where we have a resistance at 117 even. So there's a lot of sell orders at 117 and a decent amount of buy orders at 116.5. So that's just something to be kind of mindful of. We got pretty big buy orders coming through here too. There's an $11 million position at 116.7. So I feel like the price is more likely to go higher just based on the amount of interest in the price going up. Now we'll take a look at comparative analysis here in a little while. Just want to touch on the fact that we do have CME gaps still left remaining. These are less likely to get filled immediately, of course, at this point, but they're still relevant. Just note, 110 to 111, rough estimate for Bitcoin, and Solana has a CME gap as low as 203 to 207. So don't be super greedy and consider securing profits. That's always the recommendation, but at this point, it's far too early to tell. When we have a high volume pump like this, the likelihood of further upside is greater based on the simple fact that shorts and bears are very scared right now to try to short at this level. So understandably so. Now, when it comes to the macro, let's start with the daily first. When we look at liquidation, there's a lot more liquidation close by. As per usual, that's normal because people keep increasing their leverage or just taking longs, and the price is going to be closer inevitably because of that. But in the last 24 hours, we can see more liquidation on the downside, as low as approximately 115,000, and also secondary to that 113. So those are possibilities for us. But if we look at the macro structure here, minus these couple of outliers really close by, we can see there's a pretty significant amount of liquidation at 119 and just, conversely there, roughly 115.5. So we are slightly closer to 115.5. That may be the next pit stop for us before the next leg up. But either way, that's pure speculation. That doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot. It's just kind of, we're adding it to the tool bag, so to speak, when we are considering taking trades, because then we know roughly where key levels are. And when we look here as well, this is important to recognize, Bitcoin has approximately a 10-to-1, 9-to-1 ratio of longs versus shorts getting liquidated. So obviously, we can see majority of all exchanges here had somewhere in the range of 70 to 90% of their entire exchange getting liquidated on shorts versus longs. So it's a pretty significant margin. Ethereum also has about a 3-to-1 ratio. So if there's a 3-to-1 ratio on Ethereum and a 9-to-1 ratio on Bitcoin, that tells us that Ethereum isn't moving quite as fast as it either should, or there's less people trying to short that coin. It could pump higher. We're going to look at the charts to kind of see where we're at, but these are all favorable signs in most cases. Solana, you could say the same thing as well for. It's about a 3-to-1 ratio. XRP, just as an example, it's about a 2-to-1 ratio, 3-to-1. So for the most part, altcoins are pumping a third as strong as Bitcoin if you look at the relative liquidity. And that's an important thing to recognize, because if you combine that and you take the look at that and the crypto market cap for altcoins specifically, it's increasing. Those are usually two very positive signs for stability and continuation higher. Mainly because we have added volume. Obviously, the volume tells us a lot. That's a very, very loud indicator. Pun intended, I think. You want to pay attention to it, listen to the volume, right? And when it goes up, ideally, the price action is going to be more sustainable. So for a majority of altcoins, they're likely going to be sustainable. So what we're going to be looking for today in altcoins is the coins that have broken through their key level resistances and maybe have a slightly lower ratio of liquidation versus longs and shorts. So that way we know that they're ready to get squeezed out and they have a strong propensity for further upside. But in a perfect world, we want to take longs on coins that have broken their local resistance. So that's the key takeaway there. And obviously coins that are not, moving one-to-one with Bitcoin, those outliers that are specifically looking like they're either bullish or bearish, because obviously we don't want to be blindsided or just, ignorant of the fact that we could still pull back, right? All right, so all that being said, let's take a look here at some data here for Bitcoin. Let's kind of recognize our fear and greed index is tapering off. We're back in the neutral range. And that's standard when you start to see the price continue to pump. Now, ideally, if the price were to stay in this range and go higher, we're going to see a lot of FOMO and altcoins doing very well. If the price of Bitcoin pulls back, we might start to see that 2-to-1 ratio to the downside, which we've been seeing a lot of lately, where altcoins are kind of knee-jerk reactioning down lower. But if you look here from a local standpoint, this is the 4-hour time frame, there's not a ton of liquidation left to the upside here. So general consensus is that we should continue a bit lower. This is another thing I want to kind of bring to your attention. We got heavy activity here for whales. So this is a chart to kind of indicate the $100,000 to $1 million positions in the market at any given time, right? There's a cumulative delta basically just letting us know that we have more people trading right now, whales trading, than the institutional traders. This is institutional traders kind of coming down, right? So for the most part, the market's moving based on how the whales are trying to push it. So we're also seeing retail coming down too. These are small position sizes, kind of letting us know that a lot of people just probably got really hammered. It's interesting to see how low position sizes dissipate and whale traders increase. It's kind of, it's what happened exactly today. I mean, you look at this here, government shutdown. How is that going to be a positive thing in the eyes of America or the world, right? Somehow, in crypto, the price just pumped like crazy because of that. So you can't say that that isn't manipulation, because historically, the government shuts down, it's generally not a good sign. Right? So there's that. Anyways, just some friendly advice. When you see these fundamental catalysts, if you saw my video from yesterday, the day before, I've been just kind of urging caution to kind of just pump the brakes, trying not to get too crazy with trading. We took a quick little short SUI trade and closed it really quickly shortly after it was sent, because it just invalidated instantly. It's just how it works sometimes, folks. Try not to be get too much in your head, because a lot of times with stuff like this, you're better off just waiting on the sidelines until things kind of calm down. And that's kind of where we're at right now in a lot of ways. But we are coming up to a key level resistance. Keep in mind, we have our third largest area of open interest for Bitcoin at 118,000. So that reinforces resistance there. And it could imply that we may see 111 to 113 next. I think that's less likely, of course. 115 potentially on the docket, but generally speaking, we have about 20 billion in liquidation long delta. That's not something you want to try to short into. And we got a lot of liquidation here left at 120. So I think just generally speaking, 120 makes a lot more sense for the next stop. It's just a matter of where Bitcoin goes before we see that, okay? So we're going to hopefully try to identify that. And this is the last thing you want to look at when we have open interest. You rarely see this 100% delta there for open interest, basically implying that we have a lot of volatility and more propensity for further upside, especially when our true retail longs are at a low 0.01% or lower. So that disparity implies longs are a much better call, a much better consideration right now than trying to force a long, or force a short rather. Okay, so be careful shorting at this exact moment. I don't think it's a great idea. You're better off waiting for a long that may or may never happen. What I mean by that is, generally speaking, buying the top right now here into a key level resistance for Bitcoin can seem a little bit on the shaky side. It's kind of not best practice to long into a resistance. But hypothetically, we consolidate in this range here for a short while. There's a decent chance we're going to go higher with a bullish type of rectangle pattern. Those are things I try to look for with these breakouts. So let's acknowledge the obvious here. Daily time frame, price action has broken through its descending trend. Now, this descending trend is just simply based on a local high, or sorry, a lower high essentially, that we have officially broken. So it basically tells us that we've shifted the momentum. All right. Now, we haven't officially broken through this resistance range. Approximately 118,000 is that area. It's a 0.618 fib level, and also a local high that's been retested multiple times. That's considered confluence. It's not a magical number based on Fibonacci, which, don't get me wrong, Fibonacci can be beneficial, but some people trade only on that one thing, and it's a terrible call because it's just kind of it's more of a predictive indicator, and we know how predictions work in crypto. They don't. That's the concept. So be very careful doing that. They're more of like it's a placebo effect is the easy way to understand it. But it adds to it reinforces resistance at that level because there's other areas that have been tested and it's been rejected at a level. So long story short, 118,000 is the resistance for us. All right. We're over 50 on the RSI though. So this implies we've broken fairly well bullish the last couple of days, and MACD is also converging here. So the propensity for further upside is higher now because of that. And if we zoom out a little bit here, if I'm not mistaken, 115.5, this is approximately the secondary. You could just range, let's say the range 115.5 to 117.5 is a heavy accumulation zone. In other words, we have the most amount of volume there. So what that does for us, that provides us with a good solid support range, letting us know that buying in this zone is a good consideration for a long. All right. So that's kind of the general concept there. So I'll update our playout chart. I, by the way, post that on Twitter, Telegram, and Discord daily. But the concept here is that this range that we're in right now, ideally, in a perfect world, we continue to range sideways, and then altcoins will continue to flourish, and Bitcoin will pump and retest its local high. This is a double bottom type of breakout. We also have potential or propensity to see a cup and handle here, where the price action is essentially we're going to self into a lower high, lower low pattern here on the shorter time frames, and consolidating within that support range. So once more, we've got a lot of reasons why the price is more likely to go higher. It just makes perfect sense for the price to pull back initially before it legs up again. So generally speaking, I like to try to swoop in the 115, 116K range. That's ultimately what I'd be looking for as far as an entry is concerned. Looking at the 4-hour time frame though, there's no denying it. Everything is fully bullish, but we do got to recognize this. We're fairly well overextended with the RSI being over in the above 70. Okay, now generally speaking, that's a sign in which you don't want to consider selling until the RSI comes back down, because we could see a continuation higher. But it's also an indication that we probably want to wait for a better long entry before you take one at this exact time. Now, if you average in 117, 116, 115, that may be an appropriate consideration. But once more, between now and then, patience is usually going to pay off here. But for the most part, the easy way to understand it is that we're overextended, likely to pull back in the short term, but the propensity for further upside is much greater, okay? So if you do end up shorting, watch it close. And if you're considering a long, maybe consider being a little patient or averaging into a position as the price slowly pulls back. So I'm looking for a flag pattern here to kind of ultimately take a long in that range, right? Price action works its way down, traps late shorts, price rips up from there. That's what we're looking for. What are your thoughts? Why don't you comment below? Let's take a look at the next series of altcoins. Quick heads up to my traders, make sure you take full advantage of this offer here from Bitunix. There's a significant deposit reward bonus as well as a $16,000 individual reward for just trading on the exchange. If you use my link to register in the past, you're automatically eligible. If you use my link to register now, you're eligible for all future trading bonuses and competitions. Check out the links down below for more information. All right, folks, go and take a quick look here at Ethereum, kind of get the baseline of what's going on the back-end level first, before we jump into this candlestick pattern, as well as just kind of the overall theory of where Ethereum is going to go next based on its liquidation events that occurred recently. So when we look here at the back-end data, we want to understand 4,300, heavy amount of resistance, but also that gravitational pull towards open interest, right? Open interest always works like that. In a lot of ways, it's oftentimes retested. So it does imply that we have some open interest at 44.50, just above the price action. So continuation higher makes perfect sense at this point. But the key takeaway also is to recognize that 4,300s a resistance range. We've seen this level consolidated, or we consolidated previously in this range for a long time before the price legged up. That reinforces exit liquidity, and a lot of people are going to want to try to sell at this level or short of this level. So there's that. But if you look here, liquidation short delta is still quite high. So we're at 12 billion. That's less than Bitcoin, which generally implies we have less strength in Ethereum versus Bitcoin, or at least the combination of the two. So there's something to be mindful of there, but the concept remains the same. 12 billion, that's a lot of liquidation on the upside, basically a downside rather. So it implies that more buying pressure is happening and that further continuation up is greater. Okay. Now, there's a good chance we could see Bitcoin pull back for a small margin, right? We might see that retracement at 116, 115K. If so, and it stays within its support range, I still think Ethereum's in good shape. But we got to recognize that there's a lot of liquidation above the price, upwards of 44, 44.50. And there's a decent chance we see a continuation higher with this, like, it's not a cup and handle pattern, but it's more like a bullish type of flag breakout or a bullish rectangle breakout. So ultimately, that's a good combination. You combine that too with the inverse head and shoulders, there's a stronger chance we continue higher. And we want to recognize that we have our neckline here at roughly 42.40. So 42.40, 42.50. Let's speak in round numbers here. 42.50 is likely a support range for us based on that level being retested multiple times before it broke. So if we do see a bullish backtest, that would be a logical consideration for an average in between 43.50 and 42.50 and 4,300 even. Okay, so that little range there, we got a good little support range based on that previous range. Okay, or that previous resistance that hasn't been tested as a support level yet. So those are some pretty positive signs here for Ethereum in that regard. Let's double check the daily. And just kind of recognize here that the macro perspective hasn't been broken yet. So I'm tentatively bullish on Ethereum based on the simple fact that we haven't closed above our previous low range at this point just yet. So 42.80 as a close approximate, 42.80, just say round number 4,300. Unless we close above 4,300 today, we may not see this breakout happen just yet because we're still establishing lower highs in the macro. Okay, so that's kind of a trend line / support and resistance range outlook. We're also tentatively breaking 50 in the RSI here. So all the more reason why a $4,300 support or closure above is going to be super important. That would also allow for us to converge in the MACD here in the next couple of days. So ultimately, we're shifting bullish. We're not quite there yet, but we're super close. Okay, that's kind of the concept there for the macro structure. And we look at the 4 hour, we've already kind of summarized this, but we're above all moving averages minus the 200-day SMA right there at 43.30. So that in combination with 70 in the RSI here kind of tentatively rejecting leads me to believe we may see some consolidation before the price legs up again. So a consolidative effort in the 42.50 to 4,300 range would seem very sensible, especially if Bitcoin does the same thing in its 116 to 115K range, right? That's all strictly hypothetical, but what we're going to be looking for in the next 24 hours is how well Ethereum holds up in this range versus Bitcoin either pulling back or continuing higher. And a lot of times when I do trade altcoins, I like to look for disparities between the coins to ensure I understand, whether or not it's worth taking that trade or not. So at this point, a little premature, but if you do want to consider averaging in between 4,300 and roughly 4,200, we got our point of control here locally at 42. That would be a decent consideration for a long because we have tentatively broken our short-term descending trend, but the macro, we still need a day or two to confirm. Okay, so that's kind of where we're at there. That is Ethereum in a nutshell. Let's move on to Solana. And taking a look here at Solana, just before we do, I just want to kind of remind you and refresh your memory here that Solana is a pretty solid coin and it had a pretty significant amount of resistance at that 215, 216 range, which we can see so far has been broken, right? Now, when we look at the big picture, we want to understand too that there is not a lot of open interest above the price besides this 235 to 250 range. So it basically implies we could continue to run towards that level. I think that's a distinct probability just based on this metric alone, because if we see here where there's tons of open interest below the price, that reinforces support now that we've broken through that level. We've also got 2.5 billion in long liquidation delta, basically implying that longs are super, super strong right now. And even though on the last 7-day time frame, we can see there's liquidation as low as 202. I think the probability of seeing that low $200 mark right now is very low, especially with crypto market cap increasing, the liquidations kind of comparative with Bitcoin being lower. I think we're more likely to go higher, likely to retest our local high of 215. So I'm loosely considering a long in the 215 range. Once we see, what happens with Bitcoin here soon. I still think it's a little premature just to take a long at this exact time. I think we're due to correct ourselves a little bit, but that's just kind of me being a conservative trader and not trying to tell everybody to FOMO in. You'll actually probably never hear me say that, but the concept here is that we want to wait and kind of be patient to make sure that this is a breakout that's worth trading. So looking at the daily time frame, we are right here at 50 on the RSI. Okay, most coins are kind of at this I've almost broken my key level resistance level, right? So all that being said, we're not there yet, but a closure solidly over 215 to 220 today would probably put us there. So that's a very good sign in the overall sense. We got to recognize that there is still some resistance above the price, but from a daily time frame here, outside of 225 to 230, we got a pretty good continuation potential further higher to that 235 open interest range. Now, when we look at fib levels here, of course, we want to recognize too that there's some confluence, mostly below the price, letting us know that we have a lot of confirming factors that a long makes more sense based on us breaking our short-term and longer-term trends. That in combination with 70 in the RSI kind of being unclaimed so far and stochastic swinging up, good momentum, good propensity for further upside. And overall, I think we're in really good shape here to see a continuation up. So I really like what I see here for Solana. I'm going to be a little patient here and see if we can, get into the mid to low 116s for Bitcoin before I consider a long on this coin. But that's once again, I'm the guy that watches a lot of ships in the bay take off without getting into it, right? In other words, the analogy is that I miss a lot of opportunities because I'm overly patient. So if you're not like that kind of person, then average in between 218 and maybe 215. Also possibly even 213 with our local high here, just to make sure that you can kind of catch that boat if that is something you're worried about missing. But once more, the concept remains the same here. We've broken tentatively bullish, but the emphasis is on the word tentative, only because we don't know how Bitcoins are going to respond. This could very well be a trick or a trap based on the fact that the market makers are just trapping a bunch of late longs right now. And maybe they're going to rinse out some longs because everybody's FOMOing into a very unfortunate fundamental catalyst, right? A government shutdown, that's never a good sign. But once more, we've known in crypto for a very long time how ridiculous and crazy it is, and that's why we do it, right? We love this market, fun market, but you got to treat it with respect. All right, let's go and take a look at the next altcoin here. Just before we take a look at the next altcoin, I want to recommend you consider trading with Bitunix. If you use my link to register down below or have in the past, you'll always be eligible for future trading competitions, but this one is awesome. It's probably the best one I've seen yet, with a full-on $16,000 individual prize pool, as well as a collective prize pool as well for the top 30 traders. Be sure to check out the link down below for more information. So SUI, where are we at here? Let's take a look here and double check SUI and quickly note 360 is kind of that massive amount of resistance above us. Now this coin quickly turned sour on us. I think we shorted in the close to 320, 330 range. And it just got out of control quickly. So we had to cut our losses there, get out quick. And that's an important lesson for a lot of folks too, because even though we had every single bearish sign on the charts, Bitcoin pumped and SUI followed suit. So that's the concept there, is to always be vigilant and make sure you cut your losses before it gets too crazy. Super glad we did, because obviously getting out of that trade early, the price is still way higher and it could have been a disaster if we held on, right? That's exactly why invalidation levels occur or are present on my trades. Always look at those, read the trade alerts before you take the trade so you know what you're getting into. All that being said, though, the liquidation has shifted bullish. We're at 300 million. It's quite a lot for this coin. We have liquidation still a significant amount between $3 and $270, but that's more of a pipe dream at this point, unless Bitcoin were to really, really rip down to the 110, 112K range. There's a solid chance that SUI is going to continue further up here. But if we do look locally, these last 7 days of liquidation, we can recognize that 350 to 360 is that last little chunk of liquidation. So not saying you should short at 360, but there's a lot of indications letting us know that 360 is that local resistance based on open interest and the last little chunk of liquidation left. So if you understand that, that may be advantageous, but between now and then, I don't necessarily recommend shorting this coin. If you take a look here, 350 is also that local bottom that hasn't been broken yet. So we may actually see a consolidative effort here before the price action breaks out to go higher, or potentially, once again, always look out for this. When you have cup and handle patterns, they typically flag out before they take off. trapping late shorts right here. So when we look at these, when we zoom out here, let's actually double check our point of control just to kind of make sure we understand in this range, since we've been in this flag type of pattern, right? You can see this pretty significant flag pattern. We can recognize that the most amount of interest here in this coin is at 347, right where the price is at. Okay, so that reinforces resistance there. So an initial rejection in the current range makes perfect sense for me on SUI. And if we take a look at the daily time frame, we want to understand here too that we are in a position here. Hold on, let me make sure that we see this here. The daily time frame lets us know that we have confluences as well as above the price. Okay, so we've got both moving averages, our point of control, 50 on the RSI. A lot of reasons why we're going to probably see some slowing pressure here in the 350s. But you got to recognize MACD is trying to converge. Stochastic already has. We have good momentum, extra volume. Most people are FOMOing in right now. There's a great chance we continue to go up to 360, right? So I would stress caution on considering any shorts today. It's a simple way to understand it. SUI does look like it wants to continue to run to that 360 range. I would lean more towards a short at 360 than I would at 350. Let's just put it that way. So those are my 2 cents. What are yours? Comment below. Love to hear it. All right, moving on to XRP. This coin does have a type of pattern here, of course, that is important to recognize. It's a rising type of wedge pattern. They're generally construed as bearish, mainly because the price action derived from the upside and likely continuation lower because it traps late longs once the breakout occurs. But you got to also recognize too, we've broken not only our short-term descending trend, but our macro descending trend too. And that's usually a very good sign for trend reversal that you want to pay attention to. So keep in mind, continuation higher for this coin appears likely just based on the bumper sticker of looking at this coin from a bird's eye view. Now let's take a look here, of course, at the back end and understand 290 and 302, roughly 303. Basically anything above $3 has a significant amount of open interest. Those, once again, do work like magnets in a lot of ways, so we're probably more likely to see $3 before we see 280, but there's a lot of resistance above the price, especially with liquidation delta being upwards of 600 million. It's actually quite a lot for this coin. We look at the last 7 days, there's liquidation upwards of 305. So if we happen to travel into the 3 to 305 range, I may lean a little bit more towards a short, but that'd have to happen right away and not happen like within a couple of days, because things will very much change in the market here in about 24 to 48 hours if Bitcoin can continue to consolidate. I would much rather trust a pump later than a pump now from any of these altcoins, based on the simple fact that we got to wait for Bitcoin to respond and do what it needs to do, right? Most altcoins are just running because Bitcoin is. There's nothing here that's super special being like, okay, this coin, you have to trade it right now. Because most of them we've already identified are under key level resistances, even still. So I would be cautiously optimistic at this point. Daily time frame, we can also recognize we haven't broken our macro descending trend officially on the daily. Now, I know you're probably thinking, wait a minute, 4 hour just showed that we did, which is true. 4 hours is going to reflect a different trend line because it works on a different percentage. That being said, though, regardless of that fact, MACD is converging. 4 hour time frames are looking decent. Daily time frames letting us know we've broken tentatively above that resistance range. So I think we do have slightly more propensity to continue further up with this coin. Just again, recognize that open interest, point of control, resistance, 0.618 fib level, there is tons of confluence at that $3 mark, especially with that being a psychological resistance level. So long story short here is that we do see $3 soon. That would probably be a better consideration to short than it would be right now. Okay, so I think it's too early to short and too late to long. A lot of coins are looking like that right now. So just pump the brakes a little bit. But if we look at all the moving averages, we have broken above all of them on the 4 hour time frame. MACD's swinging up for the second time. Stochastic's continuing higher. Money flow index remains above the RSI. These are all signs you want to look for when you consider long positions. Okay, I just don't think there's a ton of meat left on the bone here unless Bitcoin really rallies to 118 or 120. Okay, so if Bitcoin does end up pulling back a little bit, XRP will too. But there's a strong chance that we're going to see $3 before we see 280. That's kind of what the chart's telling us. Okay, so that's kind of where we're at there. Those are my thoughts. What are yours? Why don't you comment below? Let me know. Really appreciate you watching and appreciate all the wonderful support. We've got amazing community members here. If you want to become a better community member, or just a better trader rather, join us over at Discord, Telegram, Twitter. I've got an October sale right now, of course, just to kind of reiterate that for you. There's obviously a permanent access option now. I've never offered this before. Those are limited slots. We've got majority of them already kind of filled here. Roughly half of those have already been sold. So just friendly advice, if you're considering joining, feel free to reach out. do it sooner than later, of course, just based on the fact that I don't like to offer these things too often because I don't want to have a congested community, if you will. We got a pretty tight little group there, so it's awesome. Anyways, thanks again. We'll look forward to seeing the next one. Have a great rest of your day. Take care.